friends, I'm Jessica A's from Double the Stitches, and I am so glad that you are here with me today. We're going to explore one of my favorite stress-saving tools in knitting, and that is Lifelines. If you have ever held your breath while knitting lace, cables, or any complex pattern because you are afraid of making a mistake, Lifelines are magical and they are about to change the way that you knit. I'll show you exactly what lifelines are, how to use them proactively, reactively, and some of my favorite tips to make them easy and effective. By the end, you'll feel confident that no mistake can unravel your knitting journey. I want to share a little bit about who I am and what I do. I am the knitwear designer and instructor behind Double the Stitches, the owner of the Stitch Society membership, and the host of the Knit Happy Summit. My mission is to make this timeless craft accessible and attainable for knitters of all skill levels by providing resources, support, and community to explore the world of knitting with confidence and joy. Like many of you, I have struggled with dropped stitches and that frustrating feeling of having to rip back rows of hard work and hours of time spent. And I can still remember the sinking feeling of losing a ton of lace stitches on a really big project with a deadline, of course, and not knowing how to recover. And everything changed for me when a fellow employee at the yarn shop where I worked showed me the magic of Lifelines. That simple trick turned my knitting from stressful to stress-free, and now I love teaching others how to knit with that same security and confidence. I'm excited to help you discover how Lifelines can become your secret weapon. So welcome to Lifelines for the Win, your secret weapon for stress-free knitting. So what is a lifeline? If you've never heard the term before, I'm so excited because this is going to change your knitting world. A lifeline is like knitter's insurance. It's your best friend when you're working on a tricky project. It is simply a smooth, thinner yarn than your working yarn. You thread it through your stitches so that it can act as a safety net for your project. There are two main types of lifelines. A proactive lifeline is something that you place as you go. It's great for cables, for lace, for a new technique that you're a little bit nervous about, and it's also great for marking chart repeats. You'll place it at the end of a vertical repeat or a resting row, so ideally a row that there are no yarn overs, increases, or decreases. And you can thread a tapestry needle with a smooth thread or floss under one leg of every stitch on your needle. Make sure you go around your stitch markers and then just keep knitting as normal. And reactive lifelines are something that you will use after you spot a mistake. If you are knitting along, you suddenly discover you have a cable that zigged instead of zagged, or maybe you made a knit stitch instead of a purl stitch and you just want to drop down, fix that stitch without worrying about losing all of your work. You'll find the last row that looks correct and you'll thread the lifeline through those stitches. Then when you rip back your work, your stitches cannot unravel past that lifeline as long as you have gone through all of the stitches on that row. I'm going to turn my camera over to my hands. I'm going to show you a few things you might want to have in your knitting toolkit. I've got a bunch of stuff on my desk that I want to introduce you to, and then I will demonstrate how to use these things. Let's start with the simplest thing, and that is dental floss. This is a really wonderful thing to keep in your knitting notions bag. It's great because it comes in its own little container, and it's perfect for traveling because this little piece here that you would use to cut the dental floss can also be used to cut yarn. So you don't have to travel with scissors. So that's a bonus tip for you. A regular darning needle and dental floss, and that is all that you really need. But there are some other options that you might want to consider. This is some plastic tubing. It's hollow. And it's really great for using as a lifeline too. The last thing I want to suggest is an extra spare circular sock needle. A US 1 or 2 is really perfect. Let's get started with a basic reactive lifeline. This is a piece of scrap fingering weight yarn. All those little extra balls that you might have after knitting socks or shawls, save them and they make wonderful lifelines. For a lifeline, you want something that is smooth, not fuzzy, and you want it to be smaller than the working yarn. Most of the time, fingering weight yarn is going to be a great choice. Let's say that I found a mistake up here and I want to drop down. We have a regular tapestry needle that you might use for weaving in ends, and it is threaded with fingering weight yarn. You would pick a spot to start that's below your mistake, and you're going to pick up every right leg of your stitches all the way across so that the stitches are in the correct orientation on the lifeline. You want to make sure as you do this that you are continuing along the same row of knitting and that you are not skipping any stitches. One leg of each stitch, whether it is stockinette stitch or garter stitch, and then you can just pull that through. You want the lifeline to be nice and long. You don't want it to be the same length as your work. Before you do anything with it, stretch out that strand and make sure that you haven't skipped any stitches. Let's say that we needed to fix a mistake that was here. Got some stitches on this needle, some stitches on this needle, and this is where the mistake is. I can drop that stitch off the needle and I can unravel just that column of stitches. And watch what happens, okay? So now I've unraveled all of those stitches so that I could fix a mistake that was here. And now this stitch here is caught by the lifeline, so it cannot unravel. Whatever it is that you need to fix, you can do that without worrying about losing the stitches on the side and without worrying about that stitch going beyond. Let's say this was a disaster, right? We're gonna actually take everything off the needles and I can just rip it all back without worrying, because I know that everything below this line is safe and secure with my lifeline. Okay, so look what's happening here, friends. I know that my work is secured at this point, and I can now take my needle and go through all of the stitches, put them right back on the needle without any stress or panic that I will have lost the work below. It is all rescued, and I can just slide that lifeline out. Hold your stitches so it doesn't come with the yarn. This is why you want a smooth yarn. If you used something that was fuzzy like alpaca, then you'd have little pieces of fuzz left behind. We don't want that. Now I can just go back to knitting. So that is a reactive lifeline. Again, this is something you would use after you spot a mistake. The next thing I want to show you is called a proactive lifeline. This is something that you're going to do to save your progress. When everything is going along very smoothly, you want to put a lifeline in along your live stitches and then continue to knit from there. This is easiest to do on a circular needle because you can place your stitches on the cord of your needle. You can just go through all of your stitches just like this. Make sure if you are using solid ring markers that you go around them, not through them, or they will be stuck in your work. You'll go through all of the stitches and you'll pull your lifeline through. If you're using locking stitch markers, the ones that are like safety pins, then you don't really have to worry about the stitch markers through all of the stitches. And through your work just like that, with a proactive lifeline that's going to hang out in your project as you continue to knit. I definitely recommend tying a knot at the end of your strands. When you go ahead to knit the next row, you will just knit the stitches, ignore the lifeline, the lifeline will just live underneath your stitches and it's there in case you need it. If I'm working on a big complicated project that has a lot of rows in the repeat, then I will often place a lifeline every time that I finish a repeat. If it's a bunch of rows, say it's 20 rows or 40 rows, I don't want to lose that much progress. So I will place a lifeline like this and I will leave a few of them in my project. If you are working on something that has short repeats, that's up to you, however frequently you want. In the free gift I'm going to give you, it will have a place to mark the row where you are placing your lifeline. Because when you need to go to rip back your work, you want to know exactly where you left off and you don't want to have to guess. If you're putting in a lifeline at the end of every repeat of a chart, then maybe that's easy to remember. Every time you work the last row of the chart, you'll put a lifeline in. If you are working a project and you are not using interchangeable needles, you can still place a lifeline in your live stitches. You'll just go into each stitch on your needle and just slide that through and continue along until you have grabbed all of the stitches. Making sure not to split your strands or it will be more difficult for you later. So just right under the needle right there. Pull that out and now I can tie these ends and continue working. So you can see that right underneath the knitting needle. The magic of dental floss is that it is portable. It's easy to keep in your bag. It has that built-in cutter and I'm going to just cut a piece off. Interchangeable needles have that little hole in them and you put the T-pin in it to tighten the needle on the cord. This little magical hole is also the perfect size for dental floss. All you need to do is take the end of your dental floss and put it through the hole on your interchangeable needle. Okay, so it's threaded through. I can go ahead and just knit like normal. I'm not going to make you watch me knit the whole row, but I've got my dental floss placed through the hole here. When I get to the end of the row, look what happens. As the needle comes through your work, make sure you don't pull it all the way through. You want a nice and long piece. The dental floss was threaded through my stitches. Can you see that there? The dental floss was threaded through those stitches just like magic. Next, I want to show you this tubing. It's a hollow tube, and you slide this on to your needle tip nice and securely. And you can save your work if you slide your work on to the cord. You see it's coming So there we go. Then we can tie off the ends and save our work. This is also great if you need to borrow your needles from one project to another. We want to now put our work back on our stitches. That's also super simple. We're going to just go in the other direction. So make sure that tube is nice and secure on your knitting needle. Pull that through. Your stitches are back on the needle like magic. The last thing I want to share with you, I mentioned also keeping a sock knitting needle on hand. This could be a reactive or a proactive lifeline. Let's say that I made a row of pearls, but I should have made a row of knit. So I'm going to take my smaller knitting needle, and the same way that I would have thread a piece of yarn through, I am just going through the stitches one by one with this smaller knitting needle. There is a little bit of magic in this because the needle size that you are knitting with, your working needle, is the needle that determines the size of your stitches. After we get all of this threaded on to this smaller needle, we can take our working needle out completely. We can rip back our work. It will all be secured by this smaller needle, and then we can just start working again. I'm sliding that through there. I am now sliding my work off of this working needle, stitch markers and all. I've got my work secured by the cord of this smaller needle. You can't really maybe see the blue on the blue, but it's there. And now what I can do is unravel everything. My work is now secured by the smaller knitting needle. I can slide that needle in and just knit off of this smaller needle. This is not going to impact the size of my stitches because the size of my new stitches is determined by my working needle, not by whatever is holding the stitches. These stitches are not going to get any smaller because they are already created before. All right, so that is the magic of lifelines. We have talked about different types of lifelines, proactive lifelines versus reactive lifelines, and we have talked about when to use them in different situations. We have talked about different ways to insert them into our knitting. You've got a lot of tips, tricks, and tools at your disposal. I hope that this makes a big difference in your confidence and security as you are knitting and as you take on new types of techniques and projects. I invite you to connect with me, and here are a few different ways to do that. You can join my community. It's a free group on Facebook with over 6,000 adventurous, curious knitters just like you, and I can't wait to get to know you better. You can also follow me at Double the Stitches and check out my website at doublethestitches.com. Before you go, I have some gifts for you as part of the summit. I have a Lifeline survival guide filled with tips, tricks, and clarity to help you rescue your knitting, and a code for a free pattern of your choice from my collection of over 65 designs. Head to doublethestitches.com/lifeline. There should be a button below this video where you can just click. And for the VIPs, if you grabbed the upgraded ticket for the summit, grab my workshop, my from start to finish flawless cast on and bind offs. It teaches so many different techniques. Thank you so much for joining me for this presentation. I hope that you loved it. I hope you learned something that maybe you didn't know before, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the summit.